The average fuel price currently is $142 per barrel from January to September. It was $78 per barrel in 2021. So it's roughly 82% on average, and for Jambojet is even higher. So also the strong US dollar due to the Federal Reserve Bank in US policy, interest policy. I agree these are the two reasons making very challenging the recovery of our industry. Regarding the tourist industries, to make travel easier, I think it's important for a destination to improve the level of connectivity of this destination. And also for that, it's important to encourage cooperation through interlining, cost sharing among African airlines. Also to diversify the tourism products for this destination to make it more attractive. And also the quality of services, because some of the tourists are looking at the quality of services offered on destinations, to also simplify the health screening procedures, which still has some differences from countries to countries. Visa openness is also something really important. To raise e-visa and e-payment to make easy for travelers to come. And also security, of course. Tourists need to have a good level of security. And finally, at AFRAA, we think that we need also to put in place some policies of incentives to attract investment in tourism industry.
Thank you very much. That's a very, very comprehensive analysis of the challenges faced and what the tourist destinations need to do to attract more tourism into their destinations. That was very good. Now, we are seeing more partnerships between competing airlines. An example is the code-share agreement between Kenya Airways and South Africa Airways. Apart from deepening commercial ties, how is this beneficial to travelers and the airlines themselves? And in the case of KQ and SA, you do have your challenges financially. So KQ, maybe you could answer that.
Thank you, Captain. Yes, maybe for a quick background on that, South African is one of the 3 Star Alliance members within the continent. Kenya Airways is currently the only SkyTeam airline within the continent. And one of the learnings, especially KQ and its whole affiliation, we had a joint business with Air France-KLM. One of the learnings from that end was COVID, was the need to push those boundaries and see if we can find, and we keep saying African solution, but it's for an African opportunity, because we've gone into this partnership looking for 3 key fundamental goals. One of them being outward looking at the passengers, being able to give passengers more options. So if you have a strong hub in Johannesburg, you have a strong hub in Nairobi, and secondary hubs, Mombasa, Cape Town, Durban, we're able to connect more freely, more easily. Of course, and the discussion has been looking also into West Africa. But first we get it correct in South and East Africa, then we can extend that pie outwards. The other one is in terms of looking at the aviation of Africa itself. So in line with Africa Union Civil Aviation, what the guidance in terms of trying to improve safety operation within the African airspace. So instead of having multiple small airlines that you can hope between here and Joburg or between here and maybe somewhere in West Africa, some of them you're not sure about their whole safety, security framework. You can rely on these big carriers that will be able to form a group, and they have the learnings and the lessons and the standards of either SkyTeam, Star Alliance, or even One World, we don't know. So we are able to carry that and build a stronger, safer mechanism within Africa. And the third one, which Captain Kibe, you did point or allude to, is inward looking. So that's in terms of ensuring our balance sheet. We know Kenya Airways, we know South Africa. Ensuring our balance sheet, collective building economies of scale, collective bargaining. So we do not need to order planes just as KQ. We can order planes for the whole Pan-African airline group, or if it's procurement, fuel issue, We do it through AFRAA currently, but we are able to bring those people now to come and negotiate at our terms. We're already seeing that with the big alliances that want to come and pitch to us as a group. So we're just extending that and being able to clean our balance sheet so that we are more sustainable. Again, Kenya is one of our big goals is to be a sustainable carrier within the continent. Yeah, so that's the vision behind it, ideally.
Thank you very much. That sounds good, very encouraging. I like joint purchasing for capital equipment, for sure. Scale will make it cheaper to invest in future. Let's move away from airlines for a minute. Let's move to the rail transport. Alicia, rail transport has been growing over the years, and South Africa is among the African countries with a very well-built network. What has been the main motivation for travelers to travel by rail? And how easy is it to access different destinations outside of South Africa through rail? We want to know about access through rail.
Well, the main motivation for travelers, they wouldn't be blamed to first think of rail as another method of transport from A to B. Unfortunately, the service challenges in Africa, and especially in South Africa, are vast, between load shedding and cable theft. Making it a method of transport alone isn't really feasible. But we are in the fortunate position to have such a beautiful country and so many beautiful points of interest that our leisure travel really is the main focus. And in terms of access, it's a wonderful opportunity, similar to a cruise line, where guests can check in once and cross multiple borders and see all the different spots. With great ease, we go to great lengths to make it a seamless border crossing for our guests. So that really just makes it so easy for guests. And you can travel through rural Africa and always have that luxury to come back to on board the train. So it's really an all-in-one stop, and I think rail travel is the ideal way to see Africa. So currently we travel through 10 different countries in Southern, East and West Africa. There's great opportunity to expand, especially in Kenya and Uganda, with the rail refurbishments that they're currently busy with. So there's endless opportunity.
Thank you very much. So do you need to get into any special agreements with these nations that you're crossing through? Do you need traffic rights?
Yes, we do.
So
we greatly rely on the tourism boards and the government bodies en route. All the railway lines en route are usually government operated. So it's highly dependent on their cooperation to make it possible.
Okay, but it looks like it's working for you.
Yes.
Let's see whether it will work for airlines. Coming back to airlines, we've seen a partnership developing between Qatar Airways, Rwanda, the airline, and Rwanda Airports Company, the airport operator. Hendrik, this agreement has allowed a foreign carrier to become an equity partner in an African airline and an airport. That is a pretty new thing. Are you getting a lot of support with this partnership from the general public? Have you seen support, and especially from other African states?
Thank you, Captain Kibe. Just to clarify on that one, the equity partnership at this stage is only in the airport. It's not in the airline as such, but we've got a very, very close working relationship with Rwanda Air. I think from an airport perspective, if I can start off there, we've really seen a lot of support there, and I think from our perspective, is what can we bring as a company when there's a development of a new airport? Our airport, our hub, Hamad International, just to add to the prizes, this year was the second time that we won Best Airport in the world, and we're expanding on that airport. So the expertise that we can bring as a company when developing a new airport and building world-class infrastructure, just from an expertise perspective, and then the legacy that creates, and the employment that creates. That's very important for us when we looked at this investment as well. And then on a broader perspective, when we spoke about the partnership as well, yes, we've got a very close working relationship with Rwanda Air, but we've got close working relationships with a number of airlines in Africa. We've got over 20 interline partners across Africa, and we've got over 7 codeshare partners right now as well that we work with. And it's not just within the alliances, it's outside of the alliances as well. And I think that's one thing that we've seen during COVID as well, where we can work with partners, especially looking at their areas of excellence, and see what can we learn from them and what can they learn from us. And I think that's the approach that we've taken. If I look at Southern Africa, for instance, where we recently concluded a code share with Airline. They cover 45 destinations in Southern Africa, and there's a couple of our destinations that do overlap. But in many of those, there's suboptimal frequencies. We might only be doing them 3 times a week, they be doing them 3 times a week. With a partnership, sometimes suddenly you become a daily operator. So the access becomes so much easier. And again, when developing tourism, that's the access that you need. To understand why people travel or what do they need. Sometimes they need to be there early in the morning, and there's an opportunity with one carrier, and they would leave late afternoon for connectivity. So those partnerships, I think, are really well taken by the general public because of the connectivity, and the legacy that it leaves. Thank you.
Yeah, that sounds really good. The latest airline partnership that we heard of was Nigeria Air. Have gotten into an agreement where Ethiopian Airlines will take a 49% stake in Nigeria Air, and they begin operations out of West Africa. So they're going to make a very, very strong airline group out of West Africa, which is a huge market, where Nigeria is the single largest market in West Africa, with nearly 200 million people. KQ, you have a Pan-African airline dream, where you're beginning to implement that with South Africa Airways. Now, you've heard of Qatar and its numerous partnerships in Africa. You've heard of Ethiopian Airlines and its numerous partnerships in Africa. But we've not heard of numerous partnerships between KQ and others apart from South Africa. But you have mentioned that you do have agreements with other airlines. Do you feel left out, or do you still think that the African market is large enough for even you to get into multiple such airline alliances and agreements?
Yeah, thank you, Captain. Kenya Airways also has over, I would say, roughly 100 partners worldwide at different levels. In West Africa, we actually do have recently this year announced our partnership with Africa World Airlines, based off Ghana. And just as late as last week, I was in discussions with Air Senegal for our partnership on that part of the world. And Nigeria, and maybe that's the challenge for our bigger brother Ethiopia. Nigeria is a tricky market, over 20 odd airlines registered there. Virgin Nigeria with Branson also had started its roots there. We know the challenges. And Nigeria as a country with the currency issue, which falls under AFRAA actually and IATA, where you make a lot of money, but you're not able to get it out or use it, and it gets depreciated. So there are challenges that make that partnership hard to implement. Kenya is didn't look at Nigeria being Anglophone, but we are alive to those challenges, and we wish, I would say we wish Ethiopia all the best. We do not feel left out. We actually, when I came back, we did even start a partnership with Ethiopia in terms of passenger protection. ASky, we are going into co-share with them, which is owned by Ethiopia. So the more connectivity, and I guess for us, our focus is being able to give African passengers, because realistically, travel within the continent really is by air. You do not have much. You can be quite adventurous when you try the road transport. So realistically, travel is within by air, and we want to encourage that. So the partnerships, we want to encourage as much of that as possible, because we know organic growth is a challenge. So Ethiopian and Nigerian Airways, the new airline coming up there, will be in itself a challenge, but we do support Nigeria having a strong career in itself.
Okay, thank you very much. That sounds very encouraging. So this discussion is now leading us to the next topic, which is of huge interest to all of us. The African Union Commission, AUC, under Agenda 63, created two Pan-African bodies. The first one is the Single African Air Transport Market, or SATM. The second one will be Africa Continental Free Trade Area. These two Pan-African organizations appear to be the solution for Africa's goal of doing business with each other, Pan-African trade, and that requires air transport movement. So I would like to ask, AFRAA, Single Africa Air Transport Market. I know that AFRAA is a supporter of the implementation of that, which means that you operate under an environment of open sky policy around Africa. Tell me about the challenge of implementation of SATM so far among African airlines.
Thank you. This is a very, very vast question. Of course, at AFRAA we support SATM because we have seen that liberalization will open the market and even is beneficial for not only airlines, customers as well, and will boost the traffic. We have seen it in other regions. Liberalization in Africa, we are talking about it since 1988 with the Yamoussoukro decision, who was not working in fact. That's the reason SATM was launched in 2018 with an executing agency with the African Civil Aviation Commission and some legal framework to make sure that all actors will be treated fairly on this competition. For me, competition doesn't mean airlines need to kill each other. Airlines need also to cooperate, even if they are competing. Unfortunately, this is not the case in Africa. I have to frankly to say that. At AFRAA, we are trying to put together airlines to cooperate. There are a lot of formats of cooperation. It can be interline, it can be code-share, it can be equity partnership, it can be merging. So airlines need really to cooperate. So SATM has been launched. So far, we have only 35 states who have committed to it. These 35 countries are not, in fact, complying fully with it. The bilateral air service agreements are not fully compliant with the Yamoussoukro decisions. So we really want the state who have signed to implement it as soon as possible, because the benefits is to improve the intra-African connectivity, to reduce the cost of traveling, and also the ticket prices. So we have currently a joint priorities action plan with all stakeholders. AFRAA is part of it for the implementation of SATM. It will be a long way to go. However, we think really that for the development of air transport in Africa, we need to open. Of course, there are some fear from some airlines, because when you open your market, you will see other airlines coming to take your market. Currently, we are talking about Nigeria, for example. We have no carrier in Nigeria at global level. Even if it's a very big market, domestic and internationally, other airlines are coming to take this market. This is a concern for Nigerian operators. I was there 2 weeks ago. So the project with Ethiopian Airlines is challenging. However, it's a very important project because the market is very huge. And we have an example of this kind of partnership between ET and other airlines. We have ASKY in Lome, which was created 10 or 12 years ago. It's working very well. Of course, the Nigeria market is complex, and it will not be easy. And if it is a success, I think it will change the air transport industry market in Africa. So we support SATM fully. and we share the concerns of some of the states, some of the airlines, so we need to discuss. And AFRAA is involved on all the regulatory framework being put in place for the implementation of SATAM.
Thank you very much. KQ, do you support SATAM? If you do, when will you begin to implement?
Yeah, thank you, Captain. I'll start with a simple one, the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, before we move to SATAM. Of course, Kenya is one of the signatories, one of the 5 countries that is doing the pilot project. And probably, I think, end of September, Kenya exported batteries into Ghana under the same trade agreement. So we are supporters. We do fly as Kenya Airways to 4 out of those 5 countries, excluding Egypt. We used to fly to Egypt. So the more trade, or we encourage trade within Africa, the better for us as an airline, because then we're able to follow the demand. Without that demand, we end up flying your traditional routes. So we need to create new camel routes. So we don't just stick to your Nairobi to Joburg or your Nairobi to Lagos. We're able to do Chad, we're able to do Angola, but that can only exist if there's business. So we do fully support, fully encourage. To Accra, we are almost going to double daily flights. And it's one of our West Africa hubs. So we really do fully support the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement. In terms of SATAM, Kenya is one of the signatories. Kenya has, and there's always that perception of that either Kenya or Kenya Airways are holding this back. But SATAM in itself gives freedom to African airlines. And we are free in terms of the African airlines. We have no restrictions for the African airlines. There are places where we do ask for the framework to fully understand the implementation. So like Ethiopia is an African airline. It flies double daily into Nairobi, that's 2 times a day, and daily into Mombasa. Kenya Airways actually flies only 5 times a week into Addis, and no flights from Mombasa. So if you look at that, they have round about 80–90% of the seat share, and we are not standing against that. So that is happening. One of the reasons why we've not really grown into Addis Ababa is one of them being currency issue, where Kenyan shilling is freely transferable as opposed to birrs. So we can increase, but we increase our bank accounts in Ethiopia that we are not able to convert to real currency. So there are those challenges. So it's in terms of implementation. You can see the infrastructure behind that. DG, I'm sure from your history, Kenya has currently listed around 38 airlines, locally registered airlines, Kenya Airways being one of them. Totally, if you look at all those airlines, 38 airlines have around 45 to 48% market share out of Kenya. That means the bulk of the market share is owned by foreign carriers. Compare that to most of these other countries, and maybe we go to Ethiopia, where there is 98% market share by Ethiopia, with only 3 registered airlines, the other 2 being charter airlines with no fleet by themselves. So if you look at it, really there's no much protectionism that Kenya Airways is asking for. Kenya Airways is just pushing for the framework, and I guess that has been the discussion between KQ, AFRAA, and AU. The framework of implementation, so that we are able to work freely in these markets.
Thank you very much. Jambojet. When you think of deregulation, and the most recent and most successful one is the deregulation in Europe, it launched the beginning of the low-cost carrier. Jambojet is the low-cost carrier in Kenya. When you look at the growth and development of low-cost carriers globally, where today you have EasyJet that has 300 plus airplanes, even though the legacy carriers have 200 or less airplanes. Do you support SATAM, and do you see it as a growth prospect, big time, for a low-cost carrier in Africa?
Yeah, okay, thank you, Captain Kibe. No, when I look at IATA statistics, as of June 2020, this year, the number of passengers uplifted in Africa were about 1.9% worldwide. So you can, and that's so low to the point whereby the only thing that you can look at it is see the opportunity. You find in Africa we have quite a number of highly underserved markets. The connectivity is quite low. And as a low-cost carrier, as Jambojet, that's where we find that opportunity, and that's what we're looking for. We get into markets not only to take up the market share of existing airlines, but it's to grow that market. We need to move from that 1.9, open up routes that are highly underserved, because you find there's a lot of connectivity. And that, for Jambojet, that's why for us now, we had to set up a second hub in Mombasa. There are quite a number of people who travel across different areas to connect to Mombasa. So if we are in a position to go in and serve the highly underserved markets, highly underserved routes, and given the model that we have, it's a low-cost model. It's not about even the pricing. It's how do you manage your costs? The point whereby, with the efficiencies, you are able to pass that to the customer and grow the market. We have been in discussion, and KQ, AFRAA also in this. If you look at the taxes within Europe, you find in Kenya, we pay $50 to go to Uganda, equally $50 to come. So without anything, you pay $100 before even the airline touches everything. But if you look at Europe, it goes to about €4, €5 between countries. So you find that lowers the cost of travel and stimulates the market. Out of the markets that we have gotten into, they have been growing year on year. So it is possible. We are in that space whereby we support, and we are in that space whereby we will make it easier for travel, for the business community, because for us is to make it, how are these markets accessible, easily accessible? And that's a gap that we come in to fill. And for us, that's an opportunity that we see.
Yes, AFRAA.
I just want to add on what Mr. Karanja said. Low-cost carriers aim to grow the market, not to take market share, as you rightly said. The challenge in Africa is what? Most of low-cost carriers are domestic operators because taxes and charges are lower on domestic. You talk about $50 in East Africa. It even worse in West and Central Africa is 150. So round trip is $300 you are paying is not going to the pocket of the airline. It's going to I don't know where. So this is a challenge to develop low-cost carrier on the continent. Thank you.
Hendrik, Qatar is a dominant airline globally. You are also dominant in Africa. You fly to nearly all African destinations. Do you find SATAM a threat for your growth and development if it succeeds?
Yeah, thanks. I think, COVID was an interesting period for us, if I can start off there. During COVID, our mission was just to take people home. And that was the mission that came right from the top from our chief to say, you know what, we won't stop flying. Wherever it's permitted, we'll continue flying. And I think we did that quite successfully. We brought over 3.5 million people back home, either on repatriation flights, where we work close with governments, government agencies, or through our normal scheduled flights. And during that same time, where everything started closing down, we saw it as an opportunity to open new destinations. So in Africa specifically, we opened up 8 new destinations. And during this period as well, there was the blockade that was in place, so we were able to reopen destinations, Egypt, Sudan, that we didn't fly to even before COVID, So there was a great opportunity for us on that side, and I'll go back even to Nigeria. We worked closely with the Nigerian government when a lot of carriers stopped flying there, and pre-COVID, we only had 1 daily flight to Lagos, and subsequently now we've got 28 frequencies into Nigeria. We managed to additional Lagos, we're going into the capital to Abuja, Kano, Port Harcourt, all of those were added in. So I think, it's again, it goes back to where we spoke about earlier with partnerships. Again, it's how do we develop this and grow mutually with partnerships. And I'll use another example, for instance, is Rwanda Air. I'll go back to Rwanda Air and Royal Maroc. When we tightened our partnership with Rwanda Air, we actually seized our operation directly into Kigali, and they took over the route from us. So they're now operating into Doha. We're not flying there. And as of the 12th of September, for instance, Royal Maroc has taken over the Casablanca Doha route. So we've taken our aircraft off, and now they're operating it and feeding into our network, and vice versa, our network feeding into them, back into their markets. So again, I think it's how you structure the partnerships and how you work together. There's many opportunities with this, And I think the one challenge, this is something that I also quite often have to explain to people in my head office here, is it's purely just the size of Africa. If you look at the low-cost carriers, you're talking about Europe, you can pretty much fit the whole of Europe into Algeria, and that's one country. Yeah. And I think that's where the big challenges come in, and it's that understanding. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I see as if you support, or you don't find Saturn to be a threat for your plans. So now, as we wind up this discussion, could there be any further comments that we would like to say? So I see a hand raised. You have a question?
I do have a question, if I may. My name is Andre. I work for the third biggest travel company in Europe, and the one issue that I'd hoped would be addressed today, which hasn't been addressed, is air access into Kenya itself, and Mombasa specifically. And I heard the colleague from Kenya Airways say that there is no discrimination against African airlines, but it feels like there is a discrimination against airlines out of the rest of the world into Mombasa. We have the current situation that one of the big airlines was supposed to get landing rights into Kenya during this year. They have not. They've been promised it several times. We, as a company, sold tickets with them. We have several million shillings of sales, of costs that we have to pay for cancellation fees and lost sales. And I'd like to understand why more airlines are not allowed to fly into Mombasa. It feels to me like Kenya Airways wants everyone to go through Nairobi and then to connect onto the local Kenyan Airways and Jambojet flights. I understand that, but it is harming business in a big way. Zanzibar is flying. Zanzibar is getting all the business that Mombasa should be getting. And it is a massive, massive hindrance to our business and keeping a lot of people away. And I really hope that this would be addressed today. And it's the big elephant in my room that has not been addressed. Can we hear something on that, please? I did address it with the current Minister of Tourism an hour ago, and he told me, well, I'm exiting, take it up with the next one. So now I'm taking it up.
KQ, would you like to say something before I say something?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chair. And maybe for your benefit, I'll try maybe to address a bit of that elephant. Thankfully, I'm not going anywhere, hopefully. Yeah, but for Kenya Airways, first and foremost, for clarity, bilaterals are discussed at state-to-state level. So the airline can guide. There are some airlines that are quite strong, so Ethiopia and Qatar here. Their airlines are very strong in terms of guiding the government in terms of bilaterals. Then there are others that are weaker from SA, our partner. For us, we've lived in that space for the longest time, etc. That's why I keep going back to the numbers. 48% total market share, all Kenyan airlines out of Kenya. For us, Mombasa, of course, it's limited, but Karanja has pointed out that Jambojet is to set a hub there. But just to address directly your question in terms of the foreign carriers asking for those, Kenya Airways has been talking to the government in terms of lining up an aviation framework that speaks to what's the role of Kenya Airways, what's the role of aviation in terms of, let's say, Vision 2030 or the growth of the country. Most countries have that. The Gulf, if you talk about Dubai and its connection on the hip with Emirates, you talk about Qatar, one of the main reasons why they have even the World Cup, Qatar Airways has been a strong driver to that. So for Kenya Airways, we've been pushing for that. What's that idea? So that the government does not fully divorce, especially where we move towards closer to the government as opposed to historically where Kenya Airways was a fully privatized company. What's that vision the Kenyan government has towards Kenya Airways and towards aviation in Kenya in general, because aviation was suffering in Kenya. Yeah, so that's the discussion Kenya Airways has been having with the government. Now, in terms of those access, most of them have been discussed. There are some that I'm aware of that the partners have ended up talking to us. KLM, maybe one of the airlines we're talking about, has historically had a very strong relationship with KQ. They did have those interests when our partnership, I'm sure most of you are aware, we ended and terminated it. So one of the quick responses for them was to go there. But they did reverse that because we did have new discussions with them. We will be launching something in the near future with KL. And that's in line with the partnership agreements. That's why even Kenya will stop flying to Stockholm, stop flying to Copenhagen, because of the relationship and the partnership. So you want to grow those partnerships. And intrinsically, Mombasa for us is a key market because the most number of frequencies, I'm nearing 8 to, over peak, I'm doing 10 a day into Mombasa. Karanja has more or less 8 or so flights into Mombasa. So there are high number of seats. So this traffic that you're talking about actually is already being carried. And for KL, what they had requested for is to stop in Nairobi and carry on into Mombasa. So ideally, those seats that we would have carried, either myself or Karanja, would be on the KL flight. Those passengers that may have bought things duty-free at JKIA, some of them may even have gone to Wilson. I'm aware of Safari Link, carries a lot of passengers from Wilson into Mombasa. Those passengers who have stayed on board, gone on KL into Mombasa. None of that currency translates positively to the country. Yeah? So one of the main discussions, and to maybe guide, one of the main discussions, and we've seen this around the world, Westro, Cape Town, we have someone from South Africa here. They have a collective where the airline, the airlines, the tour firms, the hoteliers, the government, the county councils, all sit in one, it's called Westro community, where they sit together and they're able to grow that air access to see which points exactly are you talking about. Can't KQ serve those points? What's needed for KQ to serve those points? If not, those other airlines can be brought in. Some of the airlines you do talk about, if you talk to the people they have employed even in Kenya, it's not even meaningful employment. Some of them are not even given medical coverage. Yeah? Something which we consider a basic necessity for KQ. So when you look at it, is it meaningful? Is it what the government or will help the country itself? Yeah. So that's the discussion that we are driving the government towards at Kenya Airways in terms of the aviation vision for Kenya. Gigi.
Thank you very much for that comprehensive analysis. But to go further, your concern is our concern. And we believe we need to grow and develop the aviation sector because it will grow and develop the tourism sector. And we are losing as Kenya to Zanzibar. I know that direct Mombasas are 6 a week, but direct to Zanzibar is 30 a week. So why aren't we getting that? So I think the way we look at it, we should look at it as government is that growth and development in total. So it's not like we're taking business away from Kenya Airways. Let's look at ways of how we can increase the traffic that is coming into Kenya, regardless of the airline. And it is true, the KLMs, Qatar, Turkish, those airlines have all wanted to fly in and out of Mombasa. But like KQ said, Kenya needs to review its aviation policy. It needs to develop an aviation master plan to agree what kind of traffic rights should we allow. Now, your concern it sounds like a very quick fix thing. We just give traffic rights to those airlines that have applied to fly into Mombasa, but the government has not yet agreed to do that. I was in government. I'm no longer in government for the time being, so I do support the growth of aviation in and out of Mombasa, but you see that's a state prerogative. All we can do as an aviation industry, tourism industry, is continue to lobby our government, make them understand the features and the benefits of an open sky, so to speak, for tourism in and out of Mombasa. But I would like to look at it from a bigger perspective. We need to look at open skies around Africa. But before we do that, we only have like 3 minutes to go. Was there anybody who may wish to make a closing statement? A very brief one. AFRAA?
Of course. For me, cooperation is key. Cooperation among African airlines, and also partnership between airlines, tourism sector, and trade sectors are very important. But for that reason, we have organized our laboratory in June. You participated. Thank you. One of the projects was around the partnership between airlines and the tourism industry and the trade also. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Alicia? Do you have any alliances or agreements with airlines? As Robia?
No, not at the moment.
Okay.
I think because our journeys are more leisure-based, cruise style, code shares with airlines are not the first thing that guests would be looking for.
Okay. Right, that's understood. Jambojet, closing?
Mine in closing. It is very clear that this African market is highly underserved. So we need to work more in partnership and grow it. We need to move people to destinations like the coast, move into the region. We need, because pre-COVID, we were all in silos, trying to see what is it that I can do as Jambojet. But when you step out, we find that we grow the market and there's enough for everyone. So let's work together to grow this market. Let's move that 1.9% world market share of total passengers uplifted in Africa as well, from 1.9 to about 4.5, because we have that opportunity to grow this market.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you.
Maybe just 2 quick comments. Just to point out, we do have some agreements with some brave companies, and look forward to having that discussion. We currently do sell flight plus rail products across Europe. And maybe to close on this other topic, KQ currently does fly to, according to KTB, 70% of the top tourist markets into Kenya. We are looking at Mombasa, but having joined 2018, I just looked at KQ footprint a few years ago. Most of those other points were covered, and at one point, even Mombasa had direct flights out of Mombasa into, I believe, London and Joburg. So growing by shrinking is not the option. We just need a clear aviation policy that can encourage growth, and you can have more or less a national carrier you can be proud of. That's it.
Thank you. Thank you. You also? Thank you so much. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have discussed about airline access, the challenges that we face. But I'd like to close by saying that SATAM, the Single Africa Air Transport Market, is the key to the growth and development of air transport and tourism and trade in Africa. If we implement SATAM, and if we implement the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, we will be able to trade and travel among Africa, within Africa. So that sounds like the key to developing aviation and tourism and trade for Africa by Africans. And we'll still continue with our relationships with our foreign carriers and operators. So in our area of influence, let's try and influence the powers that be to implement SATAM. And the biggest problem I've found is that people or states have not yet understood the features and benefits of SATAM. And what it means in simple form, an open sky policy means that you make Africa airspace domestic, so that instead of paying $50 to go to Entebbe in air passenger service charge alone, if we drove that price down to $5, which is the local charge, we could become like Europe and bring down the cost of our air travel dramatically. So if government cut its taxes, fees, and charges by 90%, we will see a huge exponential growth because the $100 ticket will become a reality. The $200 ticket will become a reality. Instead of the $400, $500, $600, $800, $1,000 tickets that we have today. So in our area of influence, let's try and encouragement, Agenda 63 of the AUC, implementation of SATM and the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. So thank you so much for your time and attention. We hope you found this discussion useful. Asante sana.